before we begin this tutorial, you want to make sure that you have the space collage copied to your desktop. Then you're going to launch Photoshop and ask for a new document by going to the File menu, New. While we're in this new dialog box, we're going to take a moment to name this file with your last name, your first initial, and then some text that describes what this project is, and we'll call this space. We want to make sure that our unit of measure is set to inches, and our width is going to be 14, our height will be 8.5, and our resolution should be set to pixels per inch, and we're going to work with a resolution of 72. Then we can click OK. Now that we have a nice blank document, we're ready to start adding images into it. So to do this, we're going to go to File, Open, and we're going to add our stars.jpg background. Now, if your window looks like this and it's just listing all of the contents in list view, you might find it helpful to change that view to icon view. Select stars.jpg, click Open. Now that we have this file open, and you look up in the upper left corner of your screen, you'll notice that we have two tabs. One is that new document we just created, and the stars which we just opened. There's lots of ways to move information from one document to another, but I find this to be the easiest way and the easiest to understand way. Now that we have these two files open in Photoshop, I'm going to click on the little tab where it says stars.jpg. I'm going to click on it and drag it down just a bit until I see it break out into its own window. Now it's important to notice that this is still open in Photoshop. And I'm going to position the window over to the side here so I still have a view of where I want to move this image into. Next thing to do is to make sure that I have the right tool for the job selected, and in this case it is the Move tool. So I want to click on it so it's selected. I don't have to keep clicking down. And then I'm going to move my cursor over my stars image, click down, and drag over on top of this new document. And when I release, the image has been added to this document. But you'll notice that it doesn't fill up the whole area. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this image is active. Clicking on it, moving it around, make sure it moves with your mouse. And then we're going to press Command T. We're going to be doing this so much that it's worth your time to memorize that key command. When we press Command T, you should see little handles appear all the way around the image. And these can be used to click and drag on to resize or reshape the document. I'm going to press Command Z because I don't want to distort the image. I want to scale it up, but I want to make sure that I don't stretch it in any way. To do that, I'm going to hold my Shift key and then click on a corner. It can be the top corner, the bottom corner, the left, the right, but it has to be a corner. It can't be a middle handle. So I'm going to hold my Shift key and I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to let go of everything for a moment, push this over into the center, hold my Shift key down again, click and drag until that fills up the entire space. You'll notice that the top and bottom of the image got cut off. But that's okay. It's way better to cut something off than it is to stretch it to make it fit. Now that I've finished my transformation, I have to let Photoshop know that I'm done. So I'm going to press my Enter key. The little handles disappear, and now I'm ready to continue working on this document. The next thing we'll do is we'll open up another image. So we're going to go to File, Open. And this time we'll add the Earth image. So I click on it, I press Open. It's opened up into its own little tab, and we're going to do the same thing that we did for the stars. We're going to click on this little tab, click and drag and move it down till we see it breaking out into its own window. When we can let go, push the image over to the side a little bit so we can see where we want to move that image into. We want to make sure that our Move tool is the active tool. Click on what you want to move, drag it over where you want to move it to, and let go. In this case, the image is much larger than our canvas area, or our document area. So it's going to be very helpful if we zoom out a little bit. So down here at the bottom of the palette, we have a magnify tool. And when you select the magnify tool, by default, typically, it has a plus sign in it. And that means that every time I click, it increases my view of the document. It doesn't change the size of the image, it just lets me zoom in or zoom out. Now if I want to zoom out, I hold my Option key and you'll see a little minus sign showing up. So I can keep clicking, and every time I click, it zooms out of my document. So plus zoom in, minus zoom out. And then I'm going to press Command T. I'm going to make sure my Move tool is the active tool. And I'm going to hold my Shift key and I'm going to click and drag. And I'm not going to make it too small because I think I'm going to want to use it quite large, but I want it to be just small enough that I can see it clearly contained within that document area. And just like before, we're going to press Enter to let Photoshop know we're done with that command. Now that we have the Earth, we want to get rid of this black background. So to do that, we're going to use the Magic Wand tool. Now whenever we're dealing with Photoshop, you'll notice that some of the tools have this funny little triangle in the lower right corner. And what that means is that there's more than one tool that shares this spot in the toolbox. And if you want to see the rest of the tools, you click and it will show you what other tools are available. If you see this between the lasso and the crop tool, click and hold to select the magic wand. What we want to do is we want to use the magic wand tool to select the black that's around the Earth. And the way the magic wand tool works is it makes selections based on two things: where I click and how similar the adjoining pixels are. So for example, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to click, and you'll notice that it starts to select all the black pixels all the way around the Earth, but once it gets to that dark part of that image, it starts to select parts of the Earth, and it looks a little crunchy. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a change. And what we're going to do is change the tolerance. This controls how similar the pixels have to be selected. So rather than 32, I'm going to try 12. And I'm going to go back to my file and click again, and that's creating a much better result. It's not selecting those dark pixels along the edge of the Earth. There's a few pixels it didn't capture here, but that's okay because we can hold our Shift key, notice the plus sign, and click and click and click on those few spots to add it to our selection. Now that we have everything we want selected, all we need to do now is press our Delete key and Command D to deselect that selection. Now that we've gotten rid of the black around the Earth, we might want to change where it's positioned within our composition. We might want to transform it. We might want to make it smaller or larger. But before you do anything, make sure you reselect your Move tool so that you can click and drag and reposition it and move it around. If you feel it's too big, press Command T to transform. Hold your Shift key, click and drag, scale it down, press Enter when you're done. So for right now, I'm going to leave it there. I might make some changes later on. And now we're going to pause for a moment and we're going to do a little bit of cleanup. One of the things I haven't done since I started this project is I haven't saved it. So I'm going to go to File, Save. And the first time I save something, I have to choose a place for it to be saved to. So you might want to click on Desktop, navigate back to your Space Collage folder, and save your work into the project folder. If you keep doing this with all your projects, you'll never lose track of them because you'll know exactly where they are. So I'm going to click Save. You'll always see this unless you click on this, but I always keep it up. And I'm going to click OK. Don't worry about what it says, just click OK. Now that we've done that, we are going to click on our Layers tab. And like any tab you see in Photoshop, you can click and drag it from where it normally sits. And we're going to start to build some good habits by giving these layers a name. Right now it's pretty easy on these little layer thumbnails to see what's on it. But if we start to work with something more complicated, something that has a lot of smaller pieces to it, you can't rely on these little thumbnails to show you what's there. So I'm going to double click on the name layer 1, and we're going to call this stars. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to click on layer 2, then double click on where the name is, and I'm going to call this Earth. Let's go back to File, Open, and add another planet to our composition. So we're going to click on planet2.jpg and click Open. And like you're getting very used to doing, we're going to click on the tab, drag it down and over a little bit so it breaks out into its own window. Double check to make sure you have the Move tool active. I'm going to move my layers palette out of the way a little bit. Click on what you want to move, drag it on top of what you want to move it to, and let go. And you can see here we have the same problem that we did with the Earth image. We have all this black surrounding it. So I'm going to reselect my Magic Wand tool, and I am going to click. Whoa. So this time, it wasn't just a little bit of that darker part of the planet that got selected. It was a whole big chunk. It looks like a cookie someone took a bite out of. And you'll notice here, it hasn't selected. It just looks sloppy. So we can try changing the tolerance. I'm going to change my tolerance to the smallest number it can be, which is 1. And when that value is that small, it means it's not tolerant at all. It only wants to select pixels that are pretty much exactly the same color as where the mouse was or the cursor was when you click down. But you can see in this case, that planet edge is so dark, even that tolerance isn't going to work. So we're going to try a different tactic. I'm going to press Command D to deselect to make sure I don't leave a selection active. And I'm going to move this down. And I'm going to go to my toolbar here, and where it shows the dotted rectangle, I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to select the elliptical marquee tool. Now ellipse is just a fancy word for something that's circular or oval. And if I click and drag, you can see that I can create a circle or an oval shape, skinny, wide, big, small. And it's no coincidence that our planet happens to be circular. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this ellipse tool to create a selection around this planet. I'm going to zoom in on this document a little bit so I have a better view of what I'm trying to select. Now we're trying to create a circle. Whenever we want to create a circle, we want to use a constrain key. And in this case, it's our Shift key. We use the Shift key we wanted to constrain when we transformed or enlarged our images before. And we're going to do the same thing here. So if we click and drag with the Shift key held, as I drag my mouse, that circle gets bigger or smaller, but it stays a circle. I'm holding my Shift key down, I'm clicking and dragging, but for me to try and guess where that cursor needs to be before I start to click and drag so it actually fits the exact outline of that planet, it's really difficult. But it's not difficult if you know this trick. So I'm going to start off taking my best guess. I'm positioning my cursor over in the upper left corner. I'm holding my Shift key, and I'm going to click and drag. All right, and that's like way, way off. Here's the trick. I'm going to keep my Shift key held down. I'm going to keep my mouse held down. But now, with whatever free finger you have, you're going to press the space bar. And when I do that, I'm still actively editing the selection, but that space bar allows me to reposition it. So I can line up the edges. When I'm happy with where they're lined up, I only let go of the space bar. And then I can continue to click and drag and tweak the size of that selection. I can keep going back, holding the space bar, and repositioning until I'm happy with where it is. When I'm happy with where things are positioned, I always want to let go of my mouse first and then my Shift key. Because if you let go of the Shift key first, sometimes it stops constraining that circle and you end up with an oval anyway. So now I have my selection where I want it. It might take you a few tries to use that new technique, but keep at it and it's well worth the trouble. So now I have my selection in place. And now if I press delete though, well, that's not the part I wanted to delete. So I'm going to press Command Z, which lets me go back in time one step. And what I need to do is I need to flip the selection inside out. So instead of the planet being selected, everything around the planet gets selected. So to do that, I'm going to go to my select menu because we're manipulating a selection, and I'm going to select inverse or reverse. When I do that, you'll notice, and if I zoom out, you can see that now I've got another little marquee selection around the outside of my canvas. And now when I press delete, everything around that selection got deleted. And then I press Command D to deselect. I can return back to my move tool, and I can position this somewhere else. Now what I don't want is I don't want these two planets to be the same size. So I'm going to press Command T to transform, hold my Shift key, click and drag. We're going to make this a little smaller, and I'm going to press Enter. So things are starting to look pretty good, but one thing I'm noticing is that these planets look really crisp and clean, and usually that doesn't happen in real life. In real life, usually the further something is away from you, the less detail you see. So we're going to use a bit of a cheat to make this stand out a little less. So I'm going to go over to my Layers palette, and first I'm going to name this layer, and we're just going to call it Planet. And I'm going to make sure that this layer is selected. And whenever you have a selected layer, you have options you can apply to that layer. And we're going to be exploring some of them, but for right now, we're just going to worry about opacity. I'm just going to move this over a little bit so you can see the effect. So you can click here and use the slider. And in order to see what's happening, you have to let go of the mouse as you're dragging every once in a while. But you can see what it does is it basically makes it more transparent or less transparent. So 100%, it's completely opaque. And at 0, it's completely transparent. So I'm going to let you decide on an opacity that looks appropriate, something that looks good to you. And now you can see that planet doesn't stand out quite as much. And in fact, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Earth layer, and I'm going to calm that down a little bit as well. So now those objects sit in the background, which leaves a lot of room to bring things into the foreground of our image and have them really take the center stage.